Look at Japan on a map, and your eye slides down a long, elegant chain of green islands curving through the Pacific. It looks spacious. It is not. Because almost all of that green is the one thing you cannot build a life on. Steep mountain and dense forest, folded ridge after ridge from one coast to the other. Japan's own national surveyors do something precise about this. They take the total land, subtract the forest, subtract the major lakes and rivers, and call what's left the habitable land. The ground you can actually put a city, a farm, or a home on. And when they finish the arithmetic, that habitable land comes to only about a third of the entire country. Onto that single third, more than 123 million people pressed together. Picture a traveler stepping off a train, not into an empty white wilderness, but into the opposite. A platform so dense with people that the crowd moves like one organism, shoulder to shoulder, funneling through the gates in a continuous river. That crush is not a failure of planning. It is the direct physical consequence of a country where 2 out of every 3 acres simply refuse to hold a town. So the real question about Japan isn't why it's crowded. Crowding is just the visible symptom. The real question is what pushed 123 million people into a third of their own country and forbade them the rest. And the answer begins not with people at all, but with the ground itself and why it will not lie flat. We start there, with the machinery under the islands that builds mountains faster than people can flatten them. Japan sits in one of the most geologically violent places on the planet, at a spot where not 2 but 4 great slabs of the Earth's crust grind into one another. The Pacific Plate, the Philippine Sea Plate, and the 2 vast continental plates carrying Eurasia and North America. Along the deep trenches offshore, the heavy ocean plates are being dragged down beneath the lighter land, a few centimeters a year, every year, without pause. That slow-motion collision does 2 things. It crumples the overriding land upward into mountains, the way a rug bunches when you push it against a wall, and it melts rock far below, feeding it back up as magma. The result is a country that is, by most measures, roughly 3/4 mountains, hills, and forest, and studded with fire. Japan today has more than 100 active volcanoes, the ones that have erupted in recent geological time or still steam and rumble. Set that against the country's size, and the number turns staggering. This single archipelago, occupying about 1/4% of the world's land, holds something like 7% of all its active volcanoes. Japan lies squarely on the Ring of Fire, the horseshoe of grinding plate boundaries that circles the Pacific and produces the great majority of the planet's eruptions and earthquakes. So when you look at that folded forested spine running the length of the islands, you are not looking at old, quiet scenery. You are looking at the live output of a machine that is still running, still lifting rock, still narrowing the flat ground people are allowed to use. That machine decided, long before any city existed, exactly how little of Japan would ever be livable. And it forced a very particular choice about where everyone would go. If only 1/3 of the country is habitable, and that third is mostly a few coastal plains hemmed between the mountains and the sea, then the arithmetic of Japanese life becomes brutally simple. Nearly everyone has to live in the same handful of places. And they do. Follow the largest plain, the Kanto, on the Pacific coast, and you arrive at the most concentrated human settlement on Earth. The greater Tokyo area alone holds close to 37 million people, and here is the single number that captures the whole country. More than 30% of every person in Japan lives in that one metropolitan region, nearly 1 in 3. Picture the traveler again, standing still inside it, a scramble crossing where 1,000 people step off the curb at once and cross without touching, train platforms timed to the second because there is no slack anywhere in the system, apartment towers stacked upward because the land ran out long ago and the only direction left to build is up. Ground inside the habitable third is so scarce and so valuable that homes shrink, commutes stretch, and the plain fills right to the base of the mountains and then simply stops, a hard green wall where the buildable land ends. And the country keeps concentrating. Even now, as Japan's total population falls, and it has fallen at every census for the past decade, with the steepest drop on record in the last 5 years, Tokyo keeps pulling people in. In the most recent count, out of 47 prefectures, only 2 gained population at all. The crowd isn't just large, it is still tightening, drawing the country inward toward its few livable plains. But that habitable third came with a hidden price, because the very ground everyone crowded onto is also the ground most likely to try to kill them. The same forces that built Japan's mountains never stopped, and the crowded plains sit directly on top of them. This is a country that feels roughly 1,500 earthquakes strong enough to notice every single year. But the machinery that makes those little tremors also makes the rare, catastrophic ones. Japan, on 0.25% of the world's land, absorbs something close to 1 in 5 of all the planet's major earthquakes. On an afternoon in March 2011, the seafloor off the northeast coast lurched in a magnitude 9 event that drove a tsunami into the coastline that rose over seawalls built specifically to stop it. The confirmed dead numbered nearly 16,000, with thousands more never found, approaching 20,000 in a matter of hours. And that was not a freak the country believes is finished. Government seismologists put the odds of a major magnitude 7 class quake striking directly beneath the Tokyo region at around 70% within 30 years, hanging over the most densely populated place on Earth. Off the southern coast, along another undersea fault, the official odds of a giant quake striking in the coming decades have only climbed through the most recent revisions. This is the trade written into Japanese geography. The flat, buildable coastal plains where the mountains finally relent are also the reactive edge of a tectonic collision. The people did not crowd onto safe ground. There wasn't any. They crowded onto the only ground there was, and then had to engineer their entire civilization to survive standing on it. Which raises the last problem of a nation packed into a thin coastal strip. How do you hold it all together? A country crammed into a narrow coastal corridor lives or dies by how well that corridor connects to itself. Japan's answer runs down the Pacific side of the main island like a spine. The original bullet train line opened in 1964, just days before the Tokyo Olympics, linking the 3 great population centers, Tokyo, Nagoya, and Osaka, along more than 500 kilometers of dedicated high-speed track. It was the first railway of its kind in the world, and it did for the crowded plains what nothing else could. It collapsed the distance between them. Today, that single original line carries on the order of 160 million passengers a year. Trains leaving as little as 3 minutes apart at the peak, 16 cars each, threading the exact ribbon of habitable land where almost everyone already lives. Where the mountains or the sea got in the way, Japanese engineers simply went through. To reach the northern island of Hokkaido, they bored a tunnel more than 50 kilometers long beneath an open strait. For decades, the longest undersea tunnel on Earth, a project driven partly by the memory of a ferry disaster in that same strait that had killed well over 1,000 people crossing open water. Trains now run under the sea where boats once capsized. Step back, and the pattern is unmistakable. The same geography that squeezed the population into a thin strip also made that strip possible to stitch together at extraordinary speed and cost. The lifeline works, but it only serves the corridor, and that raises a quieter, sadder question about everywhere the spine does not reach. The mountain valleys and remote coasts the crowd has been steadily leaving behind. Because while the plains fill, the rest of Japan is going dark. Leave the bullet train corridor and climb up into the mountains, and you find the exact opposite of the Tokyo crush. Villages emptying out one shuttered house at a time. Across Japan, there are now roughly 9 million vacant homes, about 1 in every 7 houses in the entire country standing empty. Many are what the Japanese call akiya, houses whose owners have died or moved to the city, left to sag and rot in valleys where no buyer is ever coming, because there is no one left who wants to live there. In whole rural prefectures, more than 1/5 of all homes now stand vacant, and it runs deeper than empty buildings. Sociologists here have a specific, sober term for a settlement where more than half the residents are already over 65, a village grown old enough that it may lose the ability to function at all, to keep a shop open or a road cleared, and simply fade out. By the most recent official count, Japan has more than 20,000 of these marginal villages, roughly 1/3 of all the settlements inside the country's officially designated depopulated zones. Several hundred are formally expected to vanish outright, to reach 0 residents within about a decade. Picture the traveler one last time, standing now in a silent hamlet at dusk. Terraced fields returning to weeds on the slopes above, a row of dark tile-roofed houses, and a single lit window where one of the last elderly residents is still holding on. This is the shadow of the crowded plains. The same forces that packed the cities, the scarce flat land, the pull of the corridor, the collapse of the old mountain economy, are quietly draining everywhere else. Japan isn't only crowded, it is concentrating, emptying its edges to fill its center. Put it all together, and Japan stops looking like a simply crowded country and starts looking like a place shaped, down to the last detail, by a single unforgiving fact. The ground refuses to lie flat. A machine of colliding plates lifts mountains across 3/4 of the islands and studs them with fire, leaving only about 1/3 of the country habitable at all. Onto that third, more than 123 million people have no choice but to crowd, stacking into a handful of coastal plains until nearly 1/3 of the entire nation lives around one city. That crowded ground is also the most seismically violent on the planet, so an entire civilization learned to build, commute, and sleep on a fault line held together by one astonishing spine of steel running the length of the habitable strip. And in the mountains beyond that spine, the villages the crowd left behind are going quiet, one dark window at a time. None of this is an accident, and none of it is really about people at first. It is geography setting the terms, deciding how much of a country can be used, and then letting 123 million lives arrange themselves inside those terms. 1/3 of the land, almost all of the people, on some of the most restless ground on Earth. That isn't a statistic. It is the visible answer to a question the islands themselves asked long before anyone arrived. If the hidden logic of the planet's most extreme places is the kind of story you want to keep chasing, subscribe to Aerial Earth and come with us to the next one.